Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, welcome back from break, everyone. I'm going to share with you guys how to determine if you've attained enlightenment, and then we'll just talk a little bit about continued support if you guys would like that, and then I'll just kind of wrap up our course with a little closing discussion. So how to determine if you've attained enlightenment is actually quite straightforward. You will know when you've actually attained enlightenment, but here are some things to keep in mind as you are getting closer and closer to enlightenment, how to determine if you've actually attained enlightenment or not. The first one is, no matter how enlightened you think you are, never stop practicing the teachings. An enlightened being is not going to just stop practicing the teachings. In order to get to enlightenment, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of work. There's even struggles and difficulties along the way because of the mind's lack of wisdom and all those things that we've been talking about with the fetters. It just doesn't want to do these things, right? But by the time your mind's at enlightenment, you're practicing the teachings effortlessly. It's not hard to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to people. Where when you have craving in your mind, that can be really hard because you've got that craving to work through and you really want that person to be a certain way, and you've got that anger that's arising, and it can be really hard. But by the time you get to enlightenment, it's effortless to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to people. So all the teachings, by the time you get to enlightenment, it's effortless. Your mind's not going to just stop practicing the teachings by the time you get to enlightenment. You'll be fully practicing the Eightfold Path, which includes the Three Universal Truths, the Four Noble Truths, and the Five Precepts, and meditation training, and all those other things. You'll be practicing those perfectly. Like, you won't be ever breaking the Five Precepts. Like right now, maybe you lie a little bit, or maybe you do something here or there. I don't know. You won't be breaking them at all, because you'll have seen that when you don't practice the Five Precepts, it's producing unwholesome results in your life, and it's just coming back to you, and you're just not interested in that. You get to the point where you've seen the natural law of karma so closely, and the Buddha is describing it so accurately, you just wouldn't break any of the teachings whatsoever. The Buddha shares this in his teachings too. He shares that you wouldn't stop practicing the teachings for life's sake. Meaning, if someone was holding a gun to your head and they said, okay, drink that alcohol or I'm going to kill you right now, if you were enlightened and you were practicing the teaching, you'd probably be like, okay, go ahead, pull the trigger. Because you know what that alcohol is going to do. It's like putting poison into the body. So the Buddha says, even for life's sake, you wouldn't stop practicing these teachings. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be practicing the Eightfold Path closely. When you fully attain enlightenment as an arahant, you will have eliminated all the 10 fetters. So you will understand what each individual fetter is. You will understand what the symptoms are. You will understand how to actually eliminate them, and you will know how to determine whether you've eliminated them or not. That's what I'm going to be teaching you in the August retreat. So you'll know those fetters inside and out because you would have needed to skillfully work with them in order to eradicate them and eliminate them. You wouldn't be able to have eliminated them if you didn't intellectually understand them. You didn't understand their symptoms. You didn't understand the remedy, and you didn't understand how to actually determine whether you've eliminated them or not. So by the time you get to enlightenment, the 10 fetters will be completely eradicated from your mind, and I'm going to teach you guys that in August. You will have cultivated a mind that is completely practicing the Brahma Viharas. The Brahma Viharas are loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. I teach this in chapter 14 of the very first book. So right now in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 10. So in another 4 weeks, I'm going to be teaching the Brahma Viharas. So if you haven't learned those yet, you'll be able to learn them with me, and I'll be teaching you when we get to chapter 14, but you can always learn that beforehand if you'd like. These are 4 healthy mental states that you would need to cultivate because they remedy certain specific challenges in your own mind, things like anger or indifference or worry or jealousy or envy or overexcited mind. These Brahma Viharas are going to almost be like antidotes or prescriptions for certain symptoms that are in the mind. You'll be fully practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment. Like I was just saying, that by the time you get to enlightenment, you're practicing those fully all the time. That you're practicing mindfulness, you're practicing investigation of the teachings, you're practicing energy, you have sustained energy, there's sustained joy in the mind, it's just always there. Your mind is tranquil, your mind is concentrated, your mind has equanimity, calmness, and composure. You're practicing all 7 of them at all times. But on your way to enlightenment, you practice the investigation, energy, and joy when you need to lift it out of the complacency or the dullness and lethargic, and then you practice the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity when it's excited, and you bring it down to the middle. So now more and more you're practicing all 7, but you need to practice the combination of those 3 to bring it to the middle and get it there. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll know for yourself that your mind has attained enlightenment because you won't have any discontentedness. That's the biggest thing, right? When you know that it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, there's no anger, there's no frustration, not even the slightest ickiness in the mind, you'll know that the mind's actually enlightened. And when this is occurring, you'll get these glimpses of this. You can go like a month or 2 or 3 where there's no discontentedness whatsoever, but then a little bit comes into the mind. But by that point, you'll know exactly what it is. It's a craving, desire, attachment of some sort. You look inward, you figure it out, and you eliminate it, and you work to eliminate it. And then it might be 6 months that you haven't had any discontentedness. And then boom, here comes a little bit. It's not very strong, it's very insignificant, it's very infrequent, but here comes some after 6 months. So now you take care of that one, and now you go a little bit longer. But eventually it'll be 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years that you haven't had any discontentedness. And this is why I teach students to never convince yourself that you're actually enlightened. Because when you go that 3-month period or that 6-month period without any discontentedness, you could convince yourself that you're enlightened. You could be 5 months and 3 weeks into it, and then boom, here comes a little discontentedness. It catches you by surprise, and you didn't even pay attention to it. You're like, nah, I'm enlightened. That's not discontentedness. And you won't address that craving because your mind is complacent at that point. So if you convince yourself that you're enlightened, you're going to miss it. It's like you think the game's over when in reality, this whack-a-mole is still going on, right? So you need to whack those moles whenever they come up. So don't convince yourself that you're enlightened. You would like to see 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of no discontentedness. And when you see that, you'll know that you have attained enlightenment. And the Buddha refers to this as you have now attained final knowledge. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have attained final knowledge, meaning you will fully understand the entire path to enlightenment. And that's final knowledge. And this is how somebody who's enlightened, they're able to easily teach, if they choose, the path to enlightenment. Not everybody's going to choose to teach who gets to enlightenment, but if somebody asks you a question, even if you weren't a teacher, if somebody asked you like, hey, what's those 7 factors of enlightenment? You'd be able to boop, 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 boop. Or, hey, how does the Buddha teach meditation? Oh, he teaches it like this. Here it is, right? Because by the time you have experienced no discontentedness for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you have final knowledge. You fully have cultivated all the wisdom that it takes to get to enlightenment. And you would know what that is in order to be able to accomplish that. So this is how you would know that your mind is enlightened, is that you're no longer experiencing any discontentedness. And never stop practicing the teachings. Never convince yourself that your mind is enlightened. Just continue to cultivate wisdom more and more and more. As I shared earlier in the course, in my opinion, getting to enlightenment, it's like the beginning of the rest of your life, because now your mind's fully functioning with ease. It's fully functioning optimally. You have concentration, focus, clarity, deep memory. All your relationships are at ease. You're not spending all this enormous time being angry and frustrated and agitated. You're not plotting steps to get back at that person and revenge at that person. You're not having to spend so much time figuring out all these struggles and difficulties in your life. You can just conduct life with ease at that point, because your mind's fully awake and your mind is no longer polluted. So from that point forward, you would have had to cultivate a whole lot of wisdom to be able to get to that point. So you're not going to just stop cultivating wisdom, because you've already seen the benefit of having cultivated wisdom. It led to the very best thing that you're ever experiencing in your life, which is enlightenment, which is the elimination of discontentedness. So if you've been cultivating wisdom for 5 years, 10 years, or however long it takes for you to get to enlightenment, and it's led to this wonderful benefit of having eliminated discontentedness, you're not going to just stop cultivating wisdom. You're going to be very interested in cultivating wisdom about any number of things that you might be interested to cultivate wisdom about. So don't think of it as a finish line and it's done. You know, if we ran a marathon or a 5K race or something, we might cross the finish line and be like, now I can rest, right? Now I can go back to eating all that trashy food that I used to eat because I'm done with my marathon, right? That's not what the enlightened mind does. It's not like you cross a finish line. It's like, oh, now I can go back to arguing with people. Now I can go back to being prideful and boastful and arrogant. By the time you get to enlightenment, it's impossible for your mind to argue with anybody. That your mind just physically can't do it. It's impossible to argue or be angry or frustrated or agitated. It's impossible to be boastful or arrogant or prideful. The mind just won't do it. Even if you tried and attempted to do it, it just won't do it, because the causes and conditions that are producing those things have been uprooted. That's why we call it a purification of the mind. The mind's been purified of these fetters, of these mental objects, and the causes and conditions that are producing the discontentedness, the causes and conditions that are producing the boastfulness and the arrogance and the pride and all these other difficulties and struggles on the unenlightened mind. The mind just won't do that anymore. It's just permanently in this mental state of peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. So any questions on how to determine if your mind is actually enlightened? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to share with you guys, and I think all of you guys have heard this before, but maybe some people online haven't seen this, that if you would like some continued support beyond this retreat. Oh, you have a question? Oh, sorry, Steve. Leo was pointing to you.
Just a quick one, just back on the 4 factors, 4 foundations of mindfulness.
The 4 foundations, yes, from last
just talk, there.
This one.
It's just before we go to the continued support. Could you just clarify the distinctions again between feelings, mind, condition of mind, and mental objects?
Sure.
But yeah, the initial bodily sensation I get, some heat, some tingling, some tension.
And those bodily sensations are the bodily sensations associated with cravings and the arising discontentedness. We're not talking about just like a little itch or like your back's hurting from one thing. It's associated with those cravings and discontentedness. Okay, so the feelings is, boom, now the mind is angry. You can be able to see this, like when your mind slows down enough, you'll be able to see bodily sensations, bodily sensations, bodily sensations. Womb, there's the anger. And you can see that the mind just became angry. Yeah, the feeling of anger. It has just entered into the mind, and now the mind's experiencing this anger or frustration or some other conditioned feeling, even the pleasant feelings. You can notice that too. So then after the feelings, it's going to now generally affect the condition of your mind for multiple hours, days, or weeks. It's not a feeling anymore. It's kind of like a general disgruntledness, where it started out as anger and irritation as a feeling, but now the condition of the mind is this general disgruntledness and irritation.
So I didn't cut it off as a feeling, so now it's a condition of the mind.
Now it's affecting the condition of the mind, and now you've got this like long-term agitation that's in the mind because it wasn't cut off as a bodily sensation and it wasn't cut off as a feeling. Now for several hours or days or weeks, you're experiencing this general agitation. But you can also experience the conditioned pleasant feelings too for condition of the mind. Like, I know we've talked about sex a few times in this class, but if you've had sex, right, for the next couple of hours, a couple of days, you kind of have this glow about you that, oh, wow, like I just, like you feel good about that, right? But then it fades away because it's impermanent, right? So this condition of mind, it's taking that conditioned feeling that you're experiencing, and now it's affecting the condition of the mind long term. The mental objects. Okay, so the mental objects, we generally talk about them as unwholesome qualities, like the 10 fetters. Those are all mental objects. The 3 poisons or 3 unwholesome roots, those are mental objects, craving, anger, and ignorance.
So now it's really becoming...
Yeah, that's like a deeply rooted container in the mind. But mental object, you can also have a mental object, like loving kindness is a mental object as well. And compassion is a mental object. Those Brahma Viharas. Generosity is a mental object. These are all things that are mental objects, but we generally usually talk about them in the unwholesome sense because that's what you're purifying. But there's some situations where you can see in the Buddhist teachings where he uses it in a little bit different way. Even like sometimes when he talks about thinking or thoughts, he will sometimes refer to it as a mental object. So this word mental object, it means different things in different contexts, but it's generally referring to those things that are deeply rooted, like the fetters, and that you're trying to uproot and purify and eradicate out of the mind. But there's like 10% of the time you might see this word used in a different way slightly, and you'll just understand that when you see it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So since you guys have studied this, how to determine whether you're enlightened or not, and you have a question too, Doche? Sorry.
Slightly off topic. You were talking earlier about like catching like defilements as they arise. Mm-hmm. I was using the breath before I was able to work with some, but then there's other ones I have a lot of trouble with. So can I use, is that similar to body sensations? Like if I catch the breath change, like with anger, I used to catch the breath accelerate at the same time I would notice a sensation, but I was more focusing on the breath as an indicator. And so the ones I have a lot of trouble with, should I use the breath as well? Is that okay? That's my first question.
Yeah, if it's giving you insight into this mind is about to get the feeling of anger, then use it. Yeah. But you're going to need to have awareness of the bodily sensations because that's what's actually occurring. There's these bodily sensations that are happening. But if the breath is giving you more indication in addition to the bodily sensations, then sure, you can use that insight. But just be sure you're developing the awareness of the bodily sensations because that's what the body's going to truly experience.
Thank you. And the second question, like if for sensual, again, more sensual desire talk, but with sensual desire, I would notice like there's like one sensation is very easy to pick up. Like there'll be heat starting to arise and then I can snip it off at times. But if there's a couple other sensations, I don't know what it is, like hormones or something, like breath changing, like the other sensation, should I just, if one is one enough is kind of my question. Like if I'm able to snip it off with one, but I'm not really aware of the other sensations that are going on deeply, should I explore those two to like root it out, or is one enough type of thing? You
would like to root it out. If there's any bodily sensation anywhere associated with the cravings, in the rising discontentedness, then there's a rising discontentedness. And if you don't cut it off in all those places, there's the potential for it to enter into the mind. And at that point, now the mind is experiencing that feeling. And you haven't trained the mind, you haven't stopped it. It's continuing to dwell in that feeling. So you would like to stop it before it gets there. So if you cut it off at one bodily sensation and it moves to another one, cut it off there too until it's completely gone. And it's like, okay, I saved the mind, right? It's like preventing that water from coming into the boat. You're not interested in the water coming into the boat because then you got a real problem to deal with. So once the feeling comes into the mind, now you've got a real problem to deal with. You can still get it out from there, but it's a lot harder. It's a lot more work. If you can cut it off as a bodily sensation, that's ideal.
So if I have, thank you. If I have like the one that's more prevalent, like heat arising, and the cutting off works, like it doesn't get to the mind, then the other ones I wasn't quite as clear on. It's okay as long as it's working and not proceeding further. It's okay to focus on the one that was clear.
Yeah.
Is that?
As long as it's not getting to the mind, that's what you're looking to do. As you develop your mindfulness more and more, you should be aware of all those intermediary bodily sensations and be able to cut it off at each individual one, because that's like cutting back the wild bush closer and closer to the roots so that you can uproot it. So if you cut off one branch and you're not cutting off the other branch, the plant's still growing. So you would like to cut back all these limbs and then uproot it out of the mind is what you're looking to do. So if you only are currently aware of one branch, then cut that one off, the one that you're aware of, but then keep working with your breathing mindfulness meditation and in your daily life to be aware of all those other ones as well.
Yeah. And the gross ones are easy, like the bigger stuff
Stronger
is easier
ones
to find.
Yeah.
But I guess with mindfulness, it just gets easier. Like as your mindfulness improves, you can detect the stuff. Because I'm aware that there's like the big ones have always been easy to be aware of and work with, like anger and like, so it's easy to diminish gross anger, but like the subtle stuff, I keep working to try to be aware of them.
Yeah, that's where your consistent breathing mindfulness meditation is going to pay off, because by the time you get to like the second and third stage of enlightenment, the discontentedness you're experiencing is very insignificant and very infrequent. It's just like a little tinge, and your mind needs to be so fine-tuned by that point that you notice that little tinge and you can take it out. So yeah, the strong ones are easy to spot, but those lighter ones are more challenging. So as you develop your breathing mindfulness meditation more, you'll be able to notice those more and more. And that's where the mind's becoming more and more fine-tuned. And these pleasant feelings are oftentimes hard to spot, those bodily sensations, as you're first getting going, because those sensations are usually something that we're interested in experiencing because they're pleasant, right? So you need to even be aware of that tingling sensation across your shoulders, up the back of your neck, around your skull, those goosebumps. Those are the bodily sensations of some pleasant feeling is about to arise. And it's not intuitive to be able to cut that off because we like it. It's like, oh, that feels good. But if you allow that to become a feeling, now it's a conditioned feeling of happiness or excitement, the painful feeling is waiting for you on the other side of that. It's only a matter of time. Whether it's a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, a few months, you're going to experience a painful feeling if you allow those conditioned pleasant feelings to come in. So it's good that you're noticing the strong ones, but you got to notice even the subtle ones, and not just the subtle painful ones, but the subtle pleasant ones, because that's where the real secret is. And even though it's not a secret, it's a real secret of the path to enlightenment. It's not a secret. Many people know this that are on the path to enlightenment, but you got to cut off those pleasant feelings. If there's any kind of thing that gives you the upper advantage to get to enlightenment, is to be able to see those pleasant feelings as part of the problem and be able to notice the bodily sensations associated with them. Because if you can notice those and cut them off and let them go, that's going to preserve your mind from having to ever experience those painful feelings. So if the mind's not willing to let go of the temporary conditioned pleasant feelings, it will continue to experience the painful ones. So the mind needs to be willing to let go of the temporary pleasant feelings to get to the permanent joy and the permanent happiness.
Thank you, teacher.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. All right. So I think a lot of you guys have already explored this with me in other courses where I talk about continued support. So essentially we have books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, quizzes. These are all available from our website. You can access all of this at no cost. There's in-person and online classes, courses, and retreats, all available from our website. There's ongoing programs, both in-person and online. The group learning program is a great place to build your foundation. The Words of the Buddha, the Pali Canon English study group, is something that students usually move into after they've got a pretty decent foundation in the path to enlightenment. And all of you guys have studied the foundation. So this program on Saturdays, the Pali Canon English study group, you guys are more than capable of going into there and learning and understanding. And we're actually getting ready to restart that on July 20th. Not that you need to start from the beginning. You can actually start at any point, but it's kind of nice to start from the beginning if you can. So the fact that that's coming up, it'll be kind of nice if you guys would like to start that. So this first one, the group learning program, is a 7-month program. This one is a 1.5-year program. And then you can schedule personal discussions, either in person or online, where we can meet here in Chiang Mai or any city that I'm in. Those of you guys that are in Mexico, I'm going to be there soon. So if you'd like to meet in person, we can meet there. But also for those of you guys online, you can schedule online by going to our website, and I can meet with you in Zoom one-on-one. And for those of you guys here, you can either meet in person or we can meet in Zoom if you like, and I will help you, because it's one thing learning in these classes where you learn to a certain level of degree, but it's a whole nother thing relating it to your life and your life situations. that's the real opportunity to cultivate wisdom. So like when you go back to Canada and you guys are traveling around and you're like struggling with this situation, when you're like, hey, how can I apply the teachings of the Buddha here? When you learn that, whoa, you really get some deep wisdom in that particular situation because you're learning it and applying it right away. So learning in these classes is great, but when you're applying it to your day-to-day life, that's where the wisdom really arises quite a bit. And then we have this Facebook group, which is an online community where you can ask questions, and I post in there various things. So you're always welcome to join this Facebook group too if you like to use Facebook. Okay, so any questions on continued support? Okay, so the thing that I will end with is I will share that it's been wonderful to share the teachings of the Buddha with all of you guys, and learning teachings like this, it's very challenging. That's why, in a 5-day course, we can start with a whole lot of students, and as time goes on, people's energy, gets lower and lower. It's a lot of effort. It's very rare that somebody's going to be dedicated and diligent in learning the teachings of the Buddha. Even the Buddha says this during his lifetime. He talks about how rare it is that somebody is dedicated to actually learning and practicing, because it's a lot of work to learn and grow and develop and do meditations and all this kind of stuff. So I'm very pleased anytime even just one student comes to learn and asks to learn the teachings of the Buddha, because that's one more person that has the potential to get to liberation and get to this peace and get to this joy. But understand, when you go through a learning event like this, there's a lot of content that you're learning, and you haven't remembered it all, of course. You're not going to be able to learn it all, remember it all, and practice it all with the snap of a finger. So oftentimes these courses, students do them more than one time, because each time your mind is a little bit less polluted because you've been training, and you retain more and more of that particular learning event. So researchers share with us that whenever you go through a learning event, you usually learn about 10% of what's actually being offered. And then when you do it a second time, you learn like 30 or 40%. And then you do it like a third time, you're up to like 60 or 80% of that event. And then as you repeat it, you kind of retain and learn a lot more. So if you feel any kind of overwhelmed as part of learning this, it's normal, because it's maybe the first time you've learned in a course like this with me. So if you feel overwhelmed, that's normal. And don't feel like you need to rush out and remember all of these things and implement all of these things, because the way these courses are designed is they're designed for you to be able to do them more than one time. And each time you go through the course, you're able to retain more and more and more of that material and that information. So as you guys know, I'm here for the duration. All the way through the end of this life, you guys are going to be able to get help. I'm here to help you. So I'm not going anywhere. So you've got somebody to be able to help you. You've got all these resources available to you to be able to help you. So all you need to do is, in some cases, just step back, right? When you've gone through a learning event like this, you step back and you digest for a bit. Right? If you sat down to a really big meal and you were eating a really big meal, you'd probably go sit on the sofa or go to a bedroom and take a nap for a while, allow the food to digest. And sometimes that's what you need to do when you go through a learning event like this, is you sometimes need to step back and just kind of think through all the things that you've learned. And if that's what you decide to do, then so be it, right? Step back and think about, reflect, and implement some of the things that you've learned. And then when you're ready to sit down and have another meal, we've got plenty more to chew on, right? You come back to the table and you chew on some more and you digest some more. So these 5 days, you might have taken a big bite of food, and you might need to chew that for a while. You might need to digest it. And then when you're ready to learn some more, take some more bites, I'll be here for you to be able to help you do that. So if you feel overwhelmed, that's normal. And just take some time to let it all digest. And then when you're ready to learn more, you're welcome to always come back in all these different ways that I share. Okay? So what I'll do is just thank all of you guys for your dedication, for your diligence, for your interest to learn these teachings. As you need help, feel free to reach out. And as you do, as I've often shared, I think that learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha is the very best thing you could ever do for yourself, for those close to you, and all of humanity. The Buddha himself says that if you understand even one sentence of his teachings, this is very good for your welfare and peacefulness for a very long time. Those are his exact words. So I think you guys probably understood more than one sentence in the last 5 days. So this is going to be very, very, very good for your welfare and peacefulness for a very, very long time. So thank you all for your dedication, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class, okay? Be well. Have a lovely day.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.